Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at talking heads over the past week. Popular topics of discussion on the programme included the forthcoming consultation on same-sex marriage legislation, the regulation of utilities including gas, the future of the Lord Street site in Douglas, and the announcement that the planned overhaul of the domestic rating system won't now happen during this administration. Another topic up for discussion was supermarkets charging for plastic carrier bags. Here's Stu Peters.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Should the island introduce a charge for plastic shopping bags? New regulations forcing shoppers to pay for carrier bags are being introduced in England. England's become the last nation in the UK to introduce charges for the bags. Shoppers at all big stores across the water now have to pay 5p for each one that they use. Last year, more than 7.5 billion plastic bags were handed out by major supermarkets, the equivalent of 140 per person. But the compulsory 5p fee might also start burning a hole in the pockets of Manx shoppers. As yet, it's uncertain whether similar laws will be introduced in the Isle of Man. Should the island introduce charges for plastic carrier bags, or would you object to the idea? Let's go to the lines. We've got Rob on talking about carrier bags. Hello, Rob.
So a lot of the charities now have got Hessian bags.
Yes.
They're not too expensive, and they do a lot of good to sort of supplement the charities' money. So I think that's a good idea to buy.
Stu, it's only the superstores who are charging for bags, so shop more at the smaller shops if you forget the Hessian. Yeah. Oh, that's fair. Yeah. Stu, I always keep a plastic bag in my coat pocket for casual shopping. How difficult is that, says David H. Bought a top in Mountain Warehouse this morning, was charged 5p for a bag. The lady said that they'd had an email from government saying that they had to charge for bags as from today. I suspect not from the Isle of Man government, they've not. I don't know if that's part of a chain, a UK chain or whatever. We went to Boots this afternoon, says Marie, and they've already implemented the 5p charge. As most plastic bags provided by the stores are printed with advertising for the store, then perhaps they should be paying the 5p, says Stuart. Yeah, well, it's a thought. I've taken handfuls of plastic bags to the supermarket for many years, says David H. Well, yes, you're a goody two-shoes, aren't you? Hi, Stu. Plastic bags. Stealth tax. I was charged for a bag on Sunday morning. B&Q, so tax is already here, says Jono. Right, okay. Maria called. Marks and Spencer already charged for carrier bags. I think it should apply to all shops in the island, and they should put it up to 10p a bag. Maybe people would start to use a bag for life. I've seen these bags when I'm on the bus. They're in the hedgerows and the countryside. They can choke the birds and the wildlife. Okay, the 5p, 4p goes to charity and a penny in VAT. Who benefits which charities and whose VAT system if this is not law here? Well, that's a very good point. I'm sure that Treasury officials are at the moment looking at that to see if we're actually paying VAT that we shouldn't be to the UK. It's only 5p. I think it's hilarious that some tight-fisted people seem outraged by such a small fee. Hey, just wind your neck in, money bags. Better in my pocket than somebody else's. And, you know, it's every little helps, as one of the supermarkets says. Yes, to plastic bag charging. We only seem to value something when we have to pay for it. That's true. Hedges and beaches are defaced by plastic bags. Wales has had great success. Also, I believe some or all the money raised goes toward good causes. Yes, I believe it does. Yeah, it seems that most people are in favour of this. Comments. I don't mind paying for bags as long as the money goes to a very good cause, such as MHK's pensions, says Ian. You've got to be careful, and you'll not get your tongue out of your cheek if you're not careful. How many people in the carrier bag factory are being made redundant now? Just a thought. Well, yes. We never think about people like that, do we? Yeah, carrier bag. Well, although thinking about it, I don't suppose there are many humans actually involved in the manufacture of carrier bags. It would be a fairly mechanised process, that I would have thought. Not sure if Tesco et al. Are acting illegally. It may be law in the UK, but not in our jurisdiction. If they trade here, should make adjustments to their situation. Co-op do and raise money for Manx charities. Are they paying tax here also? Very bad if costs go into the UK charity, all for charging for bags, but the island should benefit. Lottery made adjustments for us. Tesco should do too. Oh, and supply Manx produce, says Mary. Yes. Okay, Stu, I thought I had a bag for life, but managed to get divorced after 20 years. Tish. Yeah, all right then. Stu, what are we going to tax next, says Dave. There is an entire team, Dave, trying to decide how they can tax you more for everything. Bring it on, Stu. Taxing bags will hopefully see an end to people backpacking at the supermarkets, who would just plough ahead and pack without your say so. Is this people behind the till packing things together as they're scanned, meaning that your items get squashed? They drive me mad. I'd pay them to leave my stuff alone, says Martin. Well, if I've got a big shop, I need all the help I can get. It takes more energy to make a paper bag than plastic. Also, plastic bags are useful bin liners, says Tom. This matter should be the subject of a government initiative, especially where the tourist board are concerned. We could advertise on the adjacent aisle that we don't charge for plastic bags. Bound to be thousands of visitors coming in. That's from Chris Q. Thank you very much, Chris.
The Nation Station. Manx Radio.
Should gay marriage be legalised in the Isle of Man? We, the Manx public, will be asked for our views on the issue later this month when a consultation over proposals to introduce legislation which would enable same-sex couples to marry. The laws have already been introduced in England, Scotland and Wales. Laws covering civil partnerships were introduced in the Isle of Man in 2011, and last year it was confirmed that same-sex marriages recorded across the water would be treated as civil partnerships here in the island. But now the Cabinet Office has announced plans to introduce the same-sex marriage bill to be debated by the branches of Tynwald during the 2015-16 legislative year. Chief Minister Alan Bell says he doesn't want to see what he perceives to be unnecessary delays. The Manx Rainbow Association has welcomed the news that the island is making significant progress towards legalising gay marriage. Is the island now lagging behind when it comes to rights for gay couples? Is this legislation sorely needed, or is it a step too far? Are civil partnerships adequate in legally recognising same-sex couples? What do we think about it? It's something that we've discussed before. We've talked about same-sex marriage. We've talked about civil partnerships as well, which we do have. That came in 2011 in the Isle of Man, but no, they can live together and do what they want behind closed doors. Marriage should only be between a man and a woman, says Al. Well, that's a fairly popular view, Al. I don't agree with same-sex marriage. There are far bigger issues going on in the world. It's not worthy of discussion, says Ray. Oh, well, people disagree with that. Can you tell me what is the difference between a civil partnership and gay marriage? I'm not sure that I'm the person to do that, really, because I'm not entirely sure myself, but I'm sure we've got people listening who can tell me. Hey, boy, considering there's a constant flood of tears that we've lost a third of our income from the politicians, aren't there more pressing priorities than what appears to be Alan Bell's obsession with gay marriage? That from Frank. Reference gay marriage, isn't it about time that our politicians with a vested interest declare the fact? No, I don't know that it is. Because, I mean, if one of our politicians comes out and says, you know, I'm gay and I think we ought to do this, does that give it any more weight than somebody who is not gay, who says that they're in favour of it or against it or whatever? No, I think that your sexuality is still something that's private if you want it to be. If you want to talk about it, then fine. Why did the spokesman say that there's nothing wrong with marriage as long as they love each other? There are also other reasons for marriage, for example, legal issues or inheritance reasons, says David H. OK. Gay people should have the right to get married. They should have the right to be as miserable as the rest of us, says Pete. But Tish. Yes, that one comes in every time we talk about this. Is it just me that wonders why in this day and age that sexual orientation is even relevant? It should make no odds in any case. If there was a group of people who all had blue hair or some other difference, would we question whether they should be allowed to marry? I think not. Anyone who says they shouldn't is discriminating and should be looked down on by our society, which is supposed to be non-discriminatory. Stu, marriage is a religious institution, therefore only religiously minded individuals, both gay or straight, should participate in such a ceremony. Society talks about respect, therefore non-religious groups should respect the true value of marriage and either gain a civil union or just live happily together ever after. Regards from Neil. OK. Robin Peel, I'm a straight man, but I have nothing against people being gay, but the word marriage does seem to be causing a problem. The island's far different now than it was 20 years ago. People are far more tolerant about things like colour and sexuality. When it comes to marriage, it's a very delicate issue. Yeah, OK. Stu, there's little enough love in the world as it is without bigots criticising those who love each other, says David H. Yeah, I agree with that. It clearly states in the Bible that it's an abomination for a man to lie with a man and for a woman to lie with a woman. Strange old world. It's legal to have for men to have sex, but illegal to have sex with a woman at the charges for a service. Does it say that in the good book? I'm not sure. Which is a natural act. Crazy. OK, you've thought it through, you know, a lot further than I have to say. The comment of more important things to worry about, that's just blinkered to the issue of equal rights for one and all. Saying that, I've been married, don't see why the law should exempt one part of society for that particular hell, only joking. And any objections from the church are irrelevant in modern society. That from Graham. We've got Stephen on line 3. Hello, Stephen.
It's equal marriage, not. I don't like to use the word gay marriage or same-sex marriage. I like to use the term equal marriage.
Okay.
And I think that's the most important thing here. I think one of the commenters made a comment that the island is more tolerant now. I'd like to think that the island is not tolerant, but it's understanding of its responsibilities to equality. And I think that's the most important. We've now matured as a nation. We've now have an understanding that we've got to be equal in our treatment to everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing to remember. It's no longer acceptable to treat a certain section of society in an unequal manner.
Yes.
Now, that might, on occasions, mean, in this instance, it means same-sex couples can't have equal marriage to anybody else. But it could also mean, for example, that disabled people couldn't have access to public buildings. I'm not suggesting for one moment that we all rush out and it has to be done immediately, but I think it should be an acceptance and a knowledge that we've all got to work towards equality and making sure that everybody is equal and has an equal standing in society.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing we can do with this issue. And over the churches, I think, like the UK, there will be an understanding that the established church, it doesn't affect them. So the only people that I can see it will affect are those same-sex couples who wish to get married, and that's excellent news for them,
Yeah.
and a step in the right direction. But for me, the most important thing is equality. And on the island, we've got to accept that we must treat everybody equal.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much for your call, Stephen. Let's go to line 4. I knew that Peter would call. Hello, Peter.
I'm going to confine myself solely to a question that you raised and nothing else. And that is, you said you didn't know what the difference was between the Civil Partnership Act and the proposed legislation.
Yes.
Yeah? The fact is that in practice, and to all intents and purposes, there is no difference. It's just a matter of playing around with words. And it's interesting that after the 2011 Act was passed, there were those who published literature in the Isle of Man which treated the Civil Partnership Act as being the same as the proposed legislation. And I can justify that because if you look at the English statute, in Schedule 20, paragraph 17, and that's getting awfully legalistic, but you did ask for legals, there is a little innocuous-looking point which could easily pass the layman by, which is a back-reference amendment to the Matrimonial Causes Act 1973. If a person wants to get married, they have to be obviously at the age of consent. They've got to be 16 or over. That's the first thing. The second thing is they mustn't come within the prohibited degrees, nor the degrees of consanguinity or affinity. The third thing is they cannot get married if they are already married.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to have polygamy.
Yeah.
And if anybody does go through a ceremony of marriage when they fall foul of those things, then the marriage will be void.
Yes.
Now, what the English legislation did, and no doubt the Manx did somewhere, although I haven't actually identified the actual chapter and verse, what the legislation was saying was we're now adding another category to that. If a person who is in a civil partnership wish to get married in the sense, which I believe is the only sense you can, and that is between one man and one woman, then that marriage would be void because they are already in a civil partnership. So you ask yourself, if the marriage would be void, why is it void? Because assuming that there's no question of prohibited degrees, assuming that they're of age, there's only one other ground in which it could be void, and that is the law in effect is saying that it recognizes that they are already married to all intents and purposes.
Right.
There cannot be any other. So that little piece, that just hidden away, that innocuous little sentence, when you read it through, you can only conclude one thing. This statute, which has amended every piece of legislation, which it did right back to 1682, that made any reference to marriage, can only be talking about one thing, and that is marriage. You don't need a law degree, you don't need a university education, you just need common sense to say that that is what the Act was about. Now, the fact that it uses a different word in practice makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. All the same rights are there.
I'd like to think in this day and age it's immaterial to most people, certainly me, whether a couple, gay or heterosexual, live together, have a civil partnership or are married. It's not of any importance whatsoever, says Pam. We don't have to be the same as England. It's the differences that make the Isle of Man different for the better as well, says somebody else. Have you ever wondered why what was wrong for hundreds of years is suddenly okay and even desirable? Well, yeah, but I mean, there are all sorts, we used to send our children up chimneys to clean them, didn't we, and things like that. So not everything was right because it was done for hundreds of years ago. I don't have a problem with civil partnership, but I think marriage is between a man and a woman. It doesn't matter about consultation anyway, because the UK spoken, says John. How would this law affect those transgender couples? Could end up with a Duff law in the end? Okay, I don't know about that. That's it's starting to get very complicated when you start talking about that. Of course, it should be legalised. Religion doesn't have a monopoly on marriage, and nor do heterosexual people. I can see the UK headlines now if the island made the wrong choice. I grew up in the 70s, and like yourself, homosexuality was a big no-no. Over the years, my opinions changed too. Live and let love. Some good comments there.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast, featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Does the island's domestic rating system need an overhaul? The Manx Labour Party says it's been told the island's domestic rating system won't see any change before next year's general election. Party Chairman David Cretney, MLC, says the news was broken to the organisation by Treasury Minister Eddie Tear, who said there won't be enough time to revalue every property on the island by February. In October last year, Tynwald supported a motion tasking the Treasury with carrying out a number of recommendations, including the revaluation, which was due to be completed by February next year. They included amending the Rating and Valuation Act and, along with the Council of Ministers, working towards modernising or reforming the existing rating system. Physical inspections of the island's 40,000 plus domestic properties was ruled out. Instead, the new rateable values were due to be based on capital values across 9 different bands using existing data from the Valuation Office records. Earlier this year, a public consultation was carried out over the review. But now it seems that won't be happening within the timescale of this administration. Speaking at the end of last year, senior politicians said there would be an attempt to get the system in place, but acknowledged it to be very difficult to do so in the time available. Are you disappointed with the news that the domestic rating system won't now be overhauled in the next year? Or are you happy to see the current system kept in place as is? Government will drag their feet over a new rating system purely for the reason that the present system brings in more revenue, says one of our contributors. I don't know about that. Stu, no surprises there. Then seemingly it's more important to provide legislation for gay marriage than legislate against the gross unfairness to single occupants who subsidise the rest of society through the current unbalanced rating system. I doubt if this will ever be resolved in my lifetime. Regards from Neil. Sounds like Tyr bowing out before the next election. Don't expect he'll be alone on his big pension either. The proverbial long tails and ships bring to mind, let somebody else clear up your mess, says Jack. I don't know if that's fair, but Stu, the last review was over 40 years ago. Politicians have been talking about it for years. Then, when they finally decide to proceed, they don't leave enough time to get it through Tynwald. What a joke. A fair system is needed for all, and it's needed now. I'm sure it'll be an issue in the 2016 election, says Peter. OK. Stu, I'm disappointed about the rates. I live in an apartment and I know people in big 4-bedroom detached houses that pay almost the same as me, says Anne. One of the main reasons why this government's holding back on revising the domestic rates is clear, says Michael. It's being held back until after the next election in 2016 because they don't want to shock the public into paying higher rates before the next election. Aha! A political conspiracy theory. I like the idea of this. Once these ministers are re-elected in 2016 for a term of another 5 years, the domestic rates island-wide will soar. The toilet tax is already linked to the rates, meaning that the more rates you pay, the higher the toilet tax. Poorer people are going to be crucified once the domestic rating system changes. Not necessarily, Michael. I seem to remember thinking that if you were in the lower bands, then you could actually end up paying less in terms of rates. And from what you're saying, the more rates you pay, the higher the toilet tax. So that means that it's the higher earners, supposedly, or the people with more money in the house that are going to be paying more in terms of toilet tax. So that doesn't militate against the poorer people. But I take your point. I'd much rather that they took the time, did the assessment correctly and fairly, than some rushed, half-cocked fashion. But why not put it out to a commercial concern to do it by tendering for the job? Government could just deal with the many appeals then, says Sue. That's a thought. Let's go to the lines and have a word with Malcolm. Hello, Malcolm.
Now, I'm away from home at the moment, so I haven't got figures and facts in front of me.
Okay.
So excuse me if it's a little bit vague, but it's the water rates part of the rates that I'm very concerned about and have been for quite a number of years, because they arrive at the water rates figure by, I think it's something like they put on 2/3 of the rateable value, and they call that your water rate.
I don't know. I'm not the person to ask, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, it is something like that.
Yeah.
And there's just my wife and self live at home at Greba, and we don't use an awful lot of water. And I complained a couple of years ago to the water board, the water authority, about the charge, and they said, well, it does seem excessive. It's the biggest part of the rates bill.
Yeah.
Just for water. So they looked into it and they said, well, it's because we've got this system of doing it. We just look at your rateable value, put 2/3 on, and that's it.
Yes.
I said, well, that's not quantifying what we're using. And they said, well, no. I said, well, can we have a water meter? Because I'm sure that'll work out less.
Yeah.
And they said, no, you can't have a water meter unless you're a company, a commercial property.
Yes.
And so that was that. So we can't have a water meter, so we just have to keep paying the rates. So, again, a little bit of a conspiracy thing. That may be another reason why they don't want to change things.
Not a lot of fairness, I don't think.
There isn't. No, there isn't. No, a lot of it's completely unfair.
There you go. That was Malcolm, and makes some good points, I think. What else have we got? I don't think this new system of rates will mean lower rates. Be careful what you wish for, says somebody else. Yeah, I think there's probably some truth in that as well. Stu, let's face it, government are not going to apply rates council tax because that's what it is prior to the election. Banding will be as per the UK, so an average house will be a band C probably, which equates to £100 a month. I know this as I have a property across. Not all have a gold-plated pension. This is mine. Across, water can be metered, which can save quite a lot, but the Water Authority here is not set up for this. It'll have a negative effect on house prices, which are falling anyway. Council tax is also applicable to tenants, including local authority. Hi, Stu, is there a shortage of legal draftsmen because of government pruning, says Pete? I don't know. I've got no idea, but it seems balmy to me. If that's what's stopping things, then let's not bother with government at all. There's no point in having government if they pass all sorts of legislation and then can't actually do anything about it because they've got nobody to draw up the paperwork. It's crazy.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should utilities in the Isle of Man be subject to tighter regulation? Disquiet over the changes to the way gas customers will be billed from next year is continuing. From January, the standing charge will go up to cover a much bigger chunk of the company's operating costs. At the same time, the cost per unit of gas will go down. But that news has sparked an angry response from many gas customers, and there have been calls for the Office of Fair Trading to look into the situation. Chris Thomas, MHK, was the OFT's deputy chairman but quit the role earlier this year, partly due to an agreement signed by the OFT, Treasury and the Department of Economic Development with Manx Gas. It's a voluntary regulatory regime due to run until 2018, meaning government can monitor and make recommendations, but can't really force Manx Gas to do anything. Should there be stricter regulation of utilities in the island? Would it make sense for all the utilities to be brought together under one umbrella when it comes to regulation? Or might that be unworkable, do you think? Dave Cawley said a while ago the OFT looked into the profits of Manx Gas. Gas Jersey and Gas Guernsey are loss-making, but they're part of the same energy group. A few months ago, they sent a load of Manx Gas guys over to Jersey to help out because they had a problem. Now, are Manx Gas customers paying for that? Presume so. And is the profit that they can make based solely on the Isle of Man operation, or is it the whole group? Because Jersey and Guernsey are an old gas. The Isle of Man is not, and millions of pounds of taxpayers' money was spent on the new pipeline, so it's actually cheaper to provide gas here. There's less involved in the process. So the standing charge here should be going down, not up. Surely the Office of Fair Trading know that. Right then, Stu, you're a clever man. I wouldn't go that far. How many units a week do we need to use for the optimum performance of our gas? then I'll make sure that I turn my heating on for exactly that amount and no more. Love the show, Jonesy. Now, Rob Collister phoned up last week, Onken Commissioner, and I think, was it 14 or 1,500 units a year, I think. So is that 30 units of gas a week? I can't remember, to be honest, but there is a number at which point I think gas bills will be going down. But it struck me at the time that it meant that if you were a big user of gas, then your prices might go down. If you're a small user of gas, and let's face it, who are low users of gas, people that can't afford it, pensioners, people on a real tight budget, they're the ones that can't afford to have the gas, to have the central heating on all the time, so they're the ones that are being careful with it, and they're the ones that this is going to hit. The way that I see it, again, I might be completely wrong. Manx Gas agreement, 10% profit from capital employed sounds a little suspicious. What if Manx Gas required a large infrastructure investment? Would its standing charge then rise significantly to cover this in order to maintain its agreed 10% return? Well, I'm not an accountant, and return on capital employed, the way that I see this, and please do get in touch and tell me if I'm wrong. So if I had £1 million and I wanted to set up Stew Gas, I spent £1 million on doing it, and I had the same agreement with government, does that mean to say that I would be guaranteed £100,000 a year return? And, does it mean that I could have paid a load of chums nice big salaries and paid bonuses and all the rest of it and still be guaranteed that £100,000 profit? Or so is it a gross profit or a net profit? I'm not sure, but I'm sure that we've got some accountancy experts listening who'll tell us. Manx Gas is a perfect example of why utilities should be run by government. The 10% profit charged to the consumer could be given as a price cut instead of going to shareholders. Yeah? Crikey, how many other agreements have the Office of Fair Trading signed? That makes a total joke of such an office. Time to get rid of it. Taxpayers' money going into their salaries. Time for action, says Jack. Seeking fairness, as I always do, I wasn't privy to any of these discussions between the various sort of government departments and Manx Gas. I can't imagine why the government would have signed an agreement with Manx Gas unless it was ostensibly for the benefit of consumers. The only other alternatives don't bear thinking about. So, I suppose you had to be there, really, to know whether or not this was a good deal. I'm sure that a lot of the people involved in it thought it was a good deal at the time. But Chris Thomas raised a good point about a report done a couple of years ago into gas prices that's not seen the light of day. Well, if the taxpayers paid for that, the taxpayers should have access to it. And let's see what the recommendations of that were before we make our minds up about this. The Manx Gas agreement, why was it signed, and why were gas bill payers not consulted? Given this revelation, it's about protecting us when prices are high, but who protects us now when gas prices are low? When do we benefit from falling price of gas? Manx Gas seems to be able to ensure that we don't, as government's permitted them to continue their profit regime regardless. There needs to be justification from the OFT. This seems a poor deal for the public. Where's David Quirk, says Mary. I'm already very angry with Manx Gas for their bullying ways, i.e. will pay by direct debit or will take your prompt payment discount off you. I'll never pay promptly again. I've used gas for 40 years, but I'm working towards quitting, says Liz. They put the price so that people can't afford it. People cut back to save money, and then they put the price up again. Yeah, that was a bit naughty, wasn't it? Surely they'll sell more if they put the prices down, said Gary. Rob sent me the figures. Rob Collister sent me the figures again. He said 4,684 units will cost around £262, plus the standard charge of £146 per annum. So if your bill is higher than £408 a year, you might see a reduction in your gas prices. Oh, mine's going to plummet then, isn't it? That said, there's nothing saying that the unit price will increase in the next few months. Thank you, Rob. Thanks for resending that to me. Instead of endless layers of bureaucracy of suits that don't care, why don't we just put Chris Thomas in charge, says somebody. Thank you, Mrs. Thomas. Hi, Stu. I'm kidding. As a gas consumer, I won't vote for present MHKs unless the ridiculous agreement's overturned. I don't think that's going to happen. Gas is twice the price of similar-sized towns in the UK. MHK should be ashamed, says Dave. Afternoon, Stu. You're quite right in your understanding of return on capital investment. What an agreement to sign up to. And well done to Manx Gas in getting that return for their shareholders. Well, yeah, in fairness, they're just doing the job that they're there to do, aren't they? Wouldn't we all like to run a business on the basis that we have no concern on baseline cost? The more it costs, the bigger the monetary return, says Malcolm. Dave called. He said, you're putting it over that this increase in standing charge isn't very much, but currently it's £60, but it's going up to £278. That's a 350% plus increase. It's a massive hike. It's not just a couple of quid. No, I'm not saying it is a couple of quid. I've just filled my oil tank for under 400 quid, which will heat and provide hot water to my house for over a year. Stu, I think Chris Thomas is a very clever man. Watch this space for a future Chief Minister. OK. We pay 68% more for our gas on the island than the UK, says Mike. David Cole, what about all the sites where the gas cylinders were? Manx Gas has sold a lot of them off for building sites, so they're getting money back through that. Where's that money gone? Well, to an extent, David, it's up to them where the money's gone. You know, it's a private firm, isn't it? It's nothing to do with us necessarily, what they do with the profits they make.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
What would you like to see developed on the Lord Street site in Douglas? In January this year, the Department of Infrastructure called for expressions of interest in developing the Lord Street and Parade Street sites. Any development in the area will be subject to planning approval, of course, but government at the time said it envisaged that any development would be mixed commercial use, including leisure facilities, a hotel, shops and offices. And the Chief Minister has now said that a short list of potential developers is being drawn up, with the hope that a preferred developer will be announced soon. But the area has been the subject of discussion for nearly 30 years. Some time ago, Ascot Hawke was named as the preferred developer, but that company's contract was ended 2 years ago when it failed to submit plans for a proposed 4-star hotel development. Is there a need for retail outlets in the area, or a hotel, or a multi-storey car park, or are offices going to be a better option? Your comments, though. Lord Street needs blossom trees. Well, that'd be a quick fix, wouldn't it? I mean, while they're thinking about what they're going to do, they could put some blossom trees in. A pretty-looking multi-storey car park and a bus station, please, with seats and shops and trees, says Sue. Right. When will these extremely interesting and well-funded proposals be put forward to the Manx people? Mr. Bell is acting as God here. The land belongs to the nation, not Comyn. Disgraceful behaviour from politicians who just don't care about public opinion, says Simon. Well, that's what we employ them to do, isn't it? You know, we employ them to look after things like this. So I suppose that our only redress is that every 5 years we can sack them if we don't think they're doing a good job. Lord Street Car Park could be turned into a tourist attraction, Jurassic Park, to house the famous white elephants and Tynwald dinosaur MHKs. I think we could do with an Aldi or a Lidl, some choice of shopping for a change, says Christine. Well, I'm sure there's nothing stopping them coming over, but it's a bit like any of these supermarket chains. They've got to get the stuff delivered by boat, whereas in the UK, they can all be serviced by trucks. The Isle of Man would have all sorts of unique differences in terms of their distribution network. And it might just be that the catchment area that they've got here doesn't justify the investment in doing it. Get some of those special trees like they have in Ramsey. They're only 1,500 quid each. Bargain. Couldn't possibly comment. Robin Peel called. Apparently Premier Inn are looking for locations here. I think Lord Street would be the ideal place for one of them. They're always very comfortable for people looking for a short break, and the disabled access is good at the hotels. What worries me is the archaeology in the area. Old Douglas Port is underneath it, so I'd like to see a full archaeological survey of the area carried out. Alan called. They want to leave the area on the left-hand side as you're going out of Douglas as a garden area. People coming off the boat don't want to see a built-up area as soon as they get to the island. Make it a garden area so it's welcoming. How about concentrating on the prom first, says Paul? Well, yes, except that the prom is, it's a public project, isn't it? And this is more a sort of a private development, I think. Surely urban parkland is deliverable. Douglas Council have great gardens and there seems to be a lot of support on your programme for an urban green area, says Simon. How long do we have to wait for public toilets at the so-called Lord Street bus station, says William? Most financial jurisdictions seem to boast at least one skyscraper. Should we not have one too, says Brenda L. Yes, I think we should, Brenda. They've got the Gherkin in London. I think we ought to have the Kipper in the Isle of Man. It'd look like a space rocket to other people that don't know, but we'd all know it as the Kipper. Stu, I've been lucky to be married to someone who works for the finance sector. We've lived in Jersey for a while, been on a visit to Guernsey and Gibraltar, and I have to say Douglas in general is very poor and does look run down in areas. What we need is the whole area regenerated to get vibrant and cosmopolitan back into Douglas. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's from Dave. Thank you, Dave. Trees, yes, palm trees especially, continuing the tropical theme Douglas Council have on the promenade. Touch of the tropics, aye. Palm Tree Island. Visitors arriving at the airport in the 60s and 70s were always surprised and impressed to see the palm trees along the entrance to the airport. Not that you can see the palm trees at the airport now. They've disappeared under the overgrowth. Will local architects be given a chance to design something here too? Thanks to you. That's from Pauline. Get Banksy, the artist, to do Dismal Land Part 2. Brought in millions for Weston-super-Mare, says John. Yeah, I saw a press article about this Dismal Land thing that Banksy's done, and it's very odd. Decidedly sort of, anti-hero. It's a very strange thing, but apparently it's done reasonably well. So, but, would we want a Dismal Land in Douglas? Many people would say we've got one already, and it's round Tynwald. Stu, the Lord Street site should be a similar type shopping centre to to the Strand Centre, only larger. It should also contain the main post office, as when pensioners come into town on the bus, they can cash the pension on arrival, then shop in the new precinct or visit other cafes, restaurants in the complex. If you're going to do it, then do it properly. As regards public toilets at the bus station, there are some at the market hall round the corner from the buses. I didn't know that, but that's a good tip for people. Thank you. Stu, they could incorporate a bowling alley for the youngsters. The one at the Castle Mona was very well used and enjoyed, says Anne. David called, with regards Dismal Land, I tired queuing for about 2.5 hours to get to see it, but unfortunately didn't because I just ran out of time. But 100,000 people went through the gates. The town of Weston-super-Mare was inundated with people wanting to see it. It was a very significant tourist draw at the end of the season for the town. Yeah, you can imagine, though, if Banksy had come to the Isle of Man and talked to the Council of Ministers and said, I want to build something really horrible. What do you think? I don't think it would have been done at all in the Isle of Man, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Old bus station, turn it into an indoor go-kart track, make a fortune, says Jonesy. I don't think those places do make a fortune. Comment about the toilets in the market hall in Douglas. You forgot to mention it'll cost you 20 pence to use them. Well, to be honest, that's a pretty good investment if you're a bit desperate. Somebody else says, Tom says you'll need a 20 pence coin to use the market toilets. I don't object to that if I'm caught short while I'm out.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks to everyone who took the time to get involved. If you'd like to do that too, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or share your thoughts on the Facebook page anytime at all. That's Talking Heads with Stu Peters. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com, and the website's also where you'll find an update of what's being discussed on the programme each day. You can also keep up to date with that information by liking the Facebook page or following Stu Manx on Twitter. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.